talking about shared risks and shared rewards, and part of that was because 30 years ago when you started working at a big three, it was like winning the lottery. It was employment for life, and it was very much low risk. Lately, large companies, that risk and reward system's kind of been inverted. Now working at a large company is taking on much more risk. Unfortunately, there is no shared reward. Large companies these days typically don't have the ability to change quickly to international conditions, change rapidly to changing market variations, and it's employees with the long tenures that unfortunately have to bear the brunt of that. Now, typically when we start talking about ESOP, one of the pushbacks is that managers manage and employees work, and employees could never run the company. And that's true that employees wouldn't run a company necessarily inside of an ESOP, but they would have significant input into some of the decision-making processes. And I believe that the employees, the ones that are tenured, that will be there for 30 years, by the nature of them being long-term employees and having to share much more risk, are much more apt to make long-term decisions that help improve the viability of the company. Whereas unfortunately, an average CEO's tenure inside the United States is only 3 to 5 years. They have a vested interest to make sure that the long-term viability of the company is second really to the short-term profits that they garner. So it's very important for a CEO in the short term to manage this situation, to tactically have a good response to market conditions that are happening today, but the employees are the ones that have a long-term vested interest in ensuring that there's viability within inside the company and long-term growth. So having a collaboration of the two, having some short-term interest to be able to manage cash flows and be able to manage the day-to-day market, while at the same time creating a strategic plan that allows for long-term growth, is a perfect synergy of both the CEO and the employee.
The president today, you read and saw, implied that auto workers haven't given up enough. What is the reaction from auto workers today?
Well, from my perspective, I believe that he's probably correct. But in addition to that, I would add that I believe the International Union needs to step back and open up and say, yes, if we do take additional concessions, we need to also get something in return. And that I would say needs to be stock ownership into the company, so that when they do become viable, then they get their concessions back in a different aspect.
But as Steve was asking you, what do you think they're talking about on the auto floors right now? What are they saying?
Well, they may be scared. They may be scared and of the unknown, and maybe think, oh, I've given up enough. Are the upper management going to give in addition? And yes, I think with what has occurred today, there will be much more concessions from the top. In addition, there needs to be, not just from the bottom to top, it needs to be from the top to the bottom. It needs to be both sides of the table need to meet and make the concessions that is needed to make the companies viable for long term, not just short term, a band-aid to fix the mistakes.
In 2007, I was responsible for leading a team to identify ways to reduce Chrysler's fixed costs by over $2 billion. We were successful, but had we had the flexibility that an ESOP provides, it would have been a much simpler task. When I first heard of ESOPs, I wasn't convinced they'd actually work for the automotive industry, but as I became familiar with them, learned the facts, I started to understand how powerful a tool employee ownership could be.